Okay, there we go. So, hi. Thank you to everyone for coming. If you don't know me yet, my name is Katie Kyler, and I'm one of the open publishing librarians here at U of A. And this is a monthly Lunch and Learn session that we've been doing. Today, we have a special guest speaker, Kyle Beatty. And a little background on Kyle. He's a fifth year PhD student in political science and an international student from Santa Cruz, California. His dissertation work focuses on the impacts of the academic journal Eugenics Quarterly through investigating the trajectories eugenics-like thinking within the sciences took after World War II, and particularly after the 1970s, when the major eugenics journals were renamed to Social Biology and Bioscience, or Biosocial Science, pardon me. Kyle is particularly interested in the transformation of eugenics-like thinking among the power elite from the attempted direction of behavior of populations through eugenics to the attempted direction of behavior of populations through culture and neurocognition. He's also a self-taught web developer and programmer and primarily uses the statistic programming languages of R for his work. And what Kyle is going to be speaking about today is the work that he's done with the team at Critical Gambling Studies, which is one of the journals hosted through UAL. And Kyle, I'll let him talk more about it, but he's done some data analysis on the journal articles and their reach and stuff like that in order to prepare for applying for being indexed in Scopus and Web of Science. So yeah, at that, I will pass it over to Kyle and let you go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Katie. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to be here, and I'll try to run through this mostly as quickly as I can, and leave some time for questions and comments, hopefully. Um, we'll see how all of this goes. Um, okay, so yeah, like I said, or as Katie was explaining, I've been working with the Critical Gambling Studies Journal, which is one of the main, one of the journals here at University of Alberta. There's a lot of different journals actually, and I think this will be somewhat informative for people about like what you can do exactly with the data that you have for your journal, right? In the OJS system, the Open Journal system, or maybe you are in a different type of system and you have a different database. But either way, you'll have access to similar data. And so the question is like, how can you start investigating your journal a little bit? Especially in preparation for something like applying to be indexed in, Web of Science or Scopus or something like this. So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. I'm kind of going to go over my role, which I just basically explained. I'm going to show you kind of the data gathering and preparation phase, how you kind of do this. A little bit about the visualization and analysis, and then kind of how we applied some of this information that we learned to the whole indexing process, the applications. So then I'll hopefully leave some time for questions and comments. Anyways, we started with a whole bunch of questions. We were basically wondering a lot of different things about this journal. We wanted to know, how much has this journal been cited in other journals? How much has it been cited within itself, by other authors within critical gambling studies? Which authors exactly have been most cited, and who is citing them around the world? And do any like types of what we would call in network analysis, networks or communities exist? Do any conversation communities exist around these people? Like, is there any types of major citation groups or people that are in conversation with each other citing their work? And how really has this reach, impacted things internationally? Is there been any international reach? Is this just a conversation in the University of Alberta or just within Canada? Or has this gone, farther? And so these were like a lot of questions that we had. We also were really wondering, this is a critical gambling studies journal. So it's operating under a certain paradigm, a certain epistemology, certain forms of methods, et cetera. How much are non-critical gambling studies journals picking up this work? How much are they looking at this, are benefiting from this, struggling with the ideas that are presented, et cetera? So these were kind of some of the questions we had. We had a lot of questions about the journal. The journal's been around for a few years now, and so it has accumulated a bit of a history, and we kind of wanted to see how it had been developing. So basically what I tried to do here was, number one, we were dealing with this application to Scopus and Web of Science. So we basically reviewed all of the questions that were required, which Katie really helped us a lot with. She was a super huge resource for doing these applications. Once we had all of these questions, we basically went and like tried to find all the answers ahead of time. Because once you go into the whole application, you basically want to just have everything ready. I mean, you can save it and go back, but it's better to just have everything and try to go through it at once. And then just apply, just put in everything. So the main problem here was finding the answers to all these questions, right? Which is where partly our like data analysis came in. A few tips about the whole application process to Web of Science and Scopus. Plan ahead, and I mean like years ahead, like in the formatting of your journal in the beginning, how it is set up, what types of articles are being accepted, what percentage of articles are being accepted, all these, like, there's a lot of questions. In fact, I would urge you to go look at the questions ahead of time now while you're thinking about how your journal's developing over the years. It's really like a mini year process of setting up a journal for success in the future. So go look at those guidelines. Like I said, check them all out. They're really important. Just go look up Web of Science and Scopus. Talk to Katie if you want some help on this, but read over those and make sure your journal is adhering to them. And be super methodical about it, because they're very meticulous about the things that they ask for. So, and I'll show you a couple examples of that, of what I mean here in a moment. So other than that, our other goal was to do a bit of data visualization and kind of try to understand what's going on inside of this journal. So what we were really looking at was making some draft visualizations, getting some type of corrections done based on whatever feedback that we had. Finally, writing out a report where you actually, as the person that creates the graphics, explain them in prose, right? For the person that has to go look at all these graphics, so that they're like, what do all these mean? And they can easily decide, what is useful for me to use or not. In the data visualization process, you basically produce a lot of graphics that you end up maybe not incorporating into your final reports, but they're useful for you to help understand the data, right? Data visualization is as much for presenting to others as it is for you to understand what's going on inside of your own data set. And so, writing those out, if you're someone who's making these visualizations, actually explaining them in prose is really helpful. And then, like I said, you would basically have the editor select whatever visualizations they're going to use for whatever they need. If it's reports, or it's just for the indexing, or they have some other type of presentation or event that they need, they'll be able to then choose what they would like. So yeah, then you just essentially produce those final visualizations with whatever corrections there might be. And that's essentially the whole process that goes into all of it. It's really not a lot of steps if you break it down simply. It's just becomes technical and slightly complicated. So what I did is I usually use R for basically doing data analysis and things like this. And one of the main reasons I do that is because it can be rerun by anybody else. So if you have the same data set and the same R script, you can run it yourself. Or if you create a different data set of your journal, but you format it similarly, like the columns and things like this are similar, then basically you can run the same script and produce the same visualizations. So the idea here is producing reproducible work that others can reproduce for themselves, and doing it in a manner that's open source, so that hopefully others come along and they improve upon it or can benefit from it, right? So that's kind of my goal with my philosophy around writing code and things like this. So essentially what we had to do this was go through a data gathering phase, which was basically just going onto your OJS website or to your main journal website, go into log in, find your dashboard, and go and get all of the data from the articles there. They will have basically, you've got to check the filter button and you'll get basically all of your articles that have ever been written and all of the data about it. Copy all that into a spreadsheet. And then basically a big important part was finding and adding extra data. So this goes back to the questions that Scopus and Web of Science ask, because they ask a lot of things about we want a list of all of the affiliations of your authors. What universities are they affiliated with? Or we want to know what countries are all of these authors from, things like this. So you'll want to go and actually do a little bit of research about all the authors that have, submitted to your journal, which is also why, hint, hint, think about gathering this data ahead of time, right? That way you will have it ready for yourself, for the future. But basically, they will want lists of like authors, affiliations, countries, departments, etc. And so all of these things are really important to get. Another thing I did was, in order to do some GIS graphing, so like mapping of in the world, was actually go and get GPS coordinates for all of these individuals, right? So find the actual university where these authors are, get their GPS coordinates, add that into your spreadsheet, right? So a lot of those things are useful. Basically, prepare your data ahead of time so that when you go do the analysis, you have it already. Another huge thing was grabbing citations. I basically did what was like a first tier citation network. So that's where you just look at the people who have cited whatever articles are in critical gambling studies. So there were a number of articles in critical gambling studies that have been cited by other authors. You basically go get a list of all of those citations, find out about all of those authors, and now you have a first tier citations list. You essentially have two spreadsheets now. You have one, which is a main set of all of everyone who has submitted something to your journal, all of your authors. And then you have another spreadsheet, which is basically everybody who has cited someone from your journal. And you go and gather the same information about all of these authors. So again, their affiliations, universities, countries, etc. Exactly, all of these things. One of the most important things I did, that you could do it a different way. There's a lot of ways you could do this, but you need a common column once you're going to merge these two spreadsheets together, right? So the way I did it is I just grabbed the APA citation that was the same for all of them, for whatever they were, and I grabbed them for each different, different publication. And by doing that, I was able to have a common APA citation in both of my spreadsheets, and then I was able to merge them, right? So this is kind of getting more to the technical side, but this is some of the things you should think about when you're planning ahead for how to look at this. So once you do that, basically you just, like I said, you have these two spreadsheets, a main and a citation sheet, and I merge them using R. You could do this with Excel or like Google Sheets or anything like this as well. It's like different, the code, but I find it's easier with R. So I just do it with this. So once I merge something in R, I will then export that back to CSV. And I'll actually, bring these into R, and this is kind of what it looks like. So when you actually, this is like the line of code you would use in R to actually merge those two spreadsheets together by a common column, which is the APA citation that's basically being cited and the author that was inside of your journal. So now you're set up. You've got a sweet database inside of R that you can basically use to do all of your analyses, right? And I'm going to kind of show you guys a little bit about what this looks like here. So the things I did, you could do other stuff, but this is just what I did. But I did bar plots. I did some scatter plots with correlation calculations. Some categorical plots as well is helpful, like to figure out which journals you're being cited in or which countries people are coming from that are citing you. Some network plots to see, again, how many types of conversation communities that we had. And again, some GIS plots or like looking at global maps to try to look again at that type of international reach. Like, is this only a conversation in Canada or not, right? So these were some of the things that I was basically looking at. Once you get to the final phase, you're basically, after you've created a bunch of visualizations, you should ask yourself a bunch of questions. Number one, what questions have you answered about the data? And number two, what questions do you still have about the data? So there may be things that you weren't able to answer yet, or you need to get other data to answer it, or you need to create some different type of visualization, et cetera. But these are kind of like critical questions to be reflecting on as you're doing the process, right? And again, will you need to get more data to be able to answer those questions or not? This is a major question. And then, of course, you have the larger issue of which ones are you actually going to use for your needs, right? You have to somehow do a selection process and choose out of all of these graphics that you've used to understand your journal, which ones are actually useful to present to people, right? And so, or for whatever your needs might be. And so this is kind of something that will be contextual for each person. And then I always just list whatever other unresolved issues I might have or problems that are going on, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly show you to give you guys a demonstration here of this, because I think it will be just cool to see. So this is RStudio. This is basically one of the main IDE environments that we use to write R. You can also just use R in the terminal. You don't need to use a whole environment, but this makes life easier, I think. So this is the whole script that we wrote to do this, right? And all of these basically have different, code inside of here, right? That you have to actually go and look up. But basically, once you go into all of this and we run all of these different items, I just want to show you here how quickly this type of operation works and why the whole reproducibility is nice. Because you can basically reproduce all of this quite quickly. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to share actually my whole screen with you guys and see if that will make this look okay. Maybe make that small. Okay, good. Leave this back over here. So I just want to show you guys how quickly visualizations will be created. So when you run something in R like this, you basically are going to end up producing everything very fast. And so if you were to update your data at some point, get new data from a new year, something like this, you can just highlight all of your code, control enter, and you're going to see all of your everything start saving and being produced automatically, right? So this is why it's super nice to be able to have this all as a reproducible script that's fast and something that you can basically rerun at any point on new data you have, right? Every year, your journal is going to slightly change with the information that you have. And so it's going to be nice to be able to look at that. And what I'll do is I'll just show you guys here a few of the examples of some of the data or some of the graphics that we produced here. So this is basically looking at all of the universities that have been contributing to CGS. And definitely University of Alberta is there. It's most represented, but it's not the only university. In fact, you've got universities from all over the world who've been contributing to this journal, which I was very surprised to find. A lot of universities actually, even that like in Budapest, Hungary, they even are working in journals that are not even in the English language and still citing this work. So it's definitely getting some type of reach out into the world, which has been very cool to see. With this, what we're looking at is basically all the different journals that have cited this. Remember, we wanted to know, is it only being cited within like other critical journals? Or is it getting out into, for example, Journal of Gambling Studies, which is basically one of the mainstream non-critical journals, right? And indeed it is. That's important to see. And so there was a lot of important information we were able to learn from this about the mainstream journals like Frontiers in Psychiatry, Public Health, Frontiers in Sociology, etc., BMC Public Health, that were basically picking up on this work. So this is important as a larger conversation about, is there a conversation happening between critical studies journals and non-critical studies journals? This was something interesting for us to learn about. I told you I did some correlation analysis. This is looking on the x-axis at the number of file views that you get. So how many people actually download one of your articles from your journal website, and how many citations do you actually have? So they're closely associated, right? And this could be because people that once it gets cited, a lot of people come and start downloading it, or it could be because more people that download it end up citing it. But the point is that they're closely associated, and this is confirmed in other studies that have looked at this. Same thing with abstract views and citations. So the more time that people see this, the more likely or the more associated it is with citations. This is something kind of important to understand. We also did some categorical plots that were useful. This is, you know, slightly maybe intimidating plot at the first, but once you get to read it, you understand what's going on here. At the top y-axis, you have each year that the journal's been publishing. And then you have on the right x-axis here, all the different countries that have cited this over the years. And you basically on the bottom and the left here, you have the different types of publications that have been citing it. So there's a lot of books and articles, mostly other scientific articles. So very interesting to look at all of this. We were also able to see this in an even larger scale, looking at the types of journals which, or types of departments actually, where people are coming from, right? Which type of department do different authors work in who are citing things from critical gambling studies, right? Are they political scientists? Are they mostly working at addiction studies? Well, we were able to kind of parse this out by looking at these types of graphs. Same thing with looking at journals, right? Which are the main journals that are kind of being published in, and over time, again. Networking is important. When you network something, when you color it all by the same color here, this is basically showing us which authors from critical gambling studies have been majorly cited. They've been basically creating larger networks of conversations, right, over time. You can see the diversity of people who've been interacting with these authors from critical gambling studies by looking at this, which shows basically every color there is a different author who's been interacting with them, right? So there's like a diversity of conversation happening, basically, is what you can parse from this. You can also look at this over a year and see kind of how has this developed over time. We can definitely see that 2022 was the red was a massive breakout year for citations for critical gambling studies. Same thing with the type of articles. It's mostly being cited in other scientific articles, which makes sense for a academic journal. You can look at which universities around the world are citing this, who's contributing to the conversations from different schools. And this can also be looked at over time, the same way that we did before. So you can see on the top x-axis over time, 2019 to 2023. And this confirms for us, yeah, 2022 was a major breakout year for CGS. That was huge. They got into a lot of different places in the world in that year, and it's been continuing. You can see 2023. So this data is up to date as of like a week or so ago. So not bad on that front. Same thing if you're looking at just how many journals they've been interacting with over time, right? All of those colors and shapes represent different journals that CGS has been being cited by over time. So this was all very good for us to learn. We also were able to kind of look at what was the actual international reach going on here by using those GPS coordinates, like I said. And you can see, yeah, there's been conversation in almost every continent. We talked about South America, is basically the one that's kind of missing right now, but there's been substantial conversation going on around this journal internationally. So this was something really good for us to learn throughout all of this. So let me just go back here. I'm going to finish up here and we can go to some questions. Basically, how did all of this help us then, you know, actually answer these questions we needed for applying to indexes? Well, number one, this is going to help you evaluate the journal history yourself before it actually gets evaluated by Scopus and Web of Science, right? It's better to apply when you think I have a good, strong application than when you think, well, it's maybe not as good as it could be. So this is going to be a way for you to like give a self-evaluation of your own journal and your journal history before you apply. It's also going to let you prepare answers to difficult questions like requirement number 23 here, which says that you have to have, the authors must have affiliations, geographic diversity, publication records that validate their participation in the scholarly community associated with the stated scope of the journal. The demographic of the contributing author should be consistent with the topical and geographic characteristics of the editorial board. So this is very lengthy, but essentially the way we responded, and it was eventually accepted, was explaining the exact geographic diversity and demographic diversity that existed within inside of CGS. But the only way to know that is to go through and gather the information, right? So, this is basically a way for us to be able to understand, or for journal editors, people on journal boards, to understand your readership, who's reading your journal, your authorship, who's submitting to your journal, and who is citing your journal, right? Who are you in conversation with around the world? So, yeah, this is basically the end of all of this. I can go to questions and comments if anyone has anything that they or ask or wondering about.
Thank you. That presentation was amazing. I'm going to stop the recording. So if anyone has questions, feel free to raise their hand.